So I've got something I'd like to kind of talk about, and this is like I just wrote down some notes here. More questions than answers. I have no answers here. We've talked a little bit about the numbers of hunters dwindling.
Yeah.
And again, this could happen in 21 when the Fish and Wildlife Service takes their survey again. Hell, they might be back up.
Right.
Who knows? And this was all for nothing. It just got me wondering about, I was reading something about antler restrictions. Are we making it too hard for people? Are we making it unenjoyable for people that want to get into the sport? And I use antler restrictions as an example, but here in Indiana, we went to the 1 buck rule. I was, don't quote me, but I'm going to say this was around 05, maybe even a little sooner than that. I was absolutely against it. And from 1 buck rule, you used to be able in Indiana to kill a buck with your bow and a buck with a firearm. They decided to go to the 1 buck rule. The reason they gave was to spread the harvest out, give more people the opportunity to harvest bucks. What I believe they really meant was we want to grow bigger bucks.
Sure.
We want more bucks to survive so that we can grow and shoot bigger deer. Fair enough. I think it's done that. I think it's done just that. I see bigger bucks now than I did 10 years ago.
I feel like
in Indiana.
Yeah, I feel like there's a consensus when you talk about states that are hidden gems. Indiana's always in that conversation now.
It is,
and that has to be a part of it.
Well, rightfully so. But you can only kill 1 buck, so it's neither here nor there. The one thing that I will say that really rubbed me wrong then was there's only one type of hunter paying this price, and that's the one that hunts both.
Right.
If you only hunt archery, you still only kill your 1 buck. If you only hunt guns, you get 1 buck. So,
but a guy like you who would take advantage of
the diehards,
license.
the guys that are out more spending money on gas, food, hotels, licenses, all that. We were the only ones that paid this debt for everybody else. Fair enough. I won't whine too much about that because, like I said, I kind of support it now, and that kind of goes to what I've seen in my own self as kind of this evolution. I've really evolved over the last 15 years from wanting to see deer, then wanting to kill whatever deer I saw, then being a little picky, to now being really more interested in conservation, and it's something when you go through a hunter ed course, they actually talk about these 5 stages, and boy, if they're not right. I mean, I am really more interested in planting a food plot and having big deer come to it, and then hopefully taking a trophy off of that and a couple of does to eat. So,
sure.
But back to my original point is I just wanted with antler restrictions now, you can only kill 1 buck here. How hard is it for people to get into this? Like, well, I want to go, but I saw a buck that was not big enough. I mean, after I spent money on licenses and clothes and a weapon, and I took time off work and I went down there and I got in position and I finally saw a deer and I couldn't shoot him because it had, antler restrictions. Again, remember what I called this at the beginning, more questions than answers.
Yeah.
But if you look at one of these stories, I'm going to find this real quick. I noticed that the antler restrictions in Michigan started about the same time as the hunter numbers started to dwindle.
What year was that? Do you remember?
2005, 2017. Okay. I printed off too much stuff.
Look, I don't know. Like you said, this is more questions than answers, trying to have a conversation about it. I know for me personally, I'm so inexperienced in whitetail hunting that if there was an antler restriction here in Indiana, I would have to I don't think I'd be able to hunt by myself because I wouldn't trust myself to have the judgment, the knowledge to make it the right judgment and saying I can or I cannot shoot this deer based on his size. I know how to measure it, but frankly, I kind of don't. I'm not one of those guys who can look at a deer and go, oh, that's a 135 or that's a 140. That's just I'm not there yet. So it just makes, we've talked about the barrier to entry for the sport. It just makes that barrier to entry that much greater because it's that much more knowledge that I've not accumulated yet that I can't put into practice. And it makes me, and I've said this before, it makes me kind of go, oh, well, why start? Like that's too much.
I think that might be where we're at. And I don't know that that's a bad thing. Because this, and I do want to read, I found this real quick. So an example of how terrible mandatory antler point restrictions are is for managing deer in Michigan is even more obvious in the UP, where those regulations were implemented region-wide during 2008. The UP buck harvest for all seasons was estimated by the DNR at roughly 58,000 during 2007. The buck kill estimate was down to 17,000 by 2015. I mean, that's tremendous. Hunter numbers in that region also plummeted from more than 100,000 to 77,000 in 2016. They're down 25% in hunter numbers, correlating with the exact same time as antler restrictions.
But we have no way of knowing the average score of deer killed during that time.
A lot of times, in this particular instance, sometimes you'll have the antler restriction is the spread of the antlers.
Okay.
It's never the score.
The score, okay.
It's the spread up to 15 inches, has to be more than 15 inches. Man, that's tough.
It is tough.
Yeah, it's tough. Maybe a little bit of low light, a little bit of fog. I mean, you're like, that would be harder for me. The other ones are typically points. Like it has to be on 2 or 3 on one side.
Okay.
So if you take a yearling buck who's, we call them dummies for a reason. They are inexperienced. They're just bouncing around the woods. They don't know. A good yearling buck might have 2 or 3 points on a side. So what you have there is a genetically superior yearling. It's going to get whacked.
Yeah.
Because he's not smart enough to be safe yet.
Sure.
And then what do you do?
Depending on what hunter is in a tree.
Well, I'm saying if there's a 3-point antler restriction on per side.
Yeah.
And then this yearling comes by. Oh, that's fair.
Could
Boom.
be a stud.
Yeah, what you're doing is you're taking out the superior genetics, you're taking them out of the pool, and you're allowing the inferior genetics to grow.
That's an interesting point.
So, yeah, it's different, but I just wonder across the entire gamut of our industry if we start to look at when we make it difficult. Let's not even say difficult. If we start to exclude or set up barriers, and some of these are scientifically proven to be good for the deer and some aren't, that's fine. We won't get into that. But if you start to look at hunter numbers compared to increased license costs, compared to in Maine, they wanted crossbows. And I can't remember if they got them shut down or not, but the guides, there are hunters arguing against the crossbow.
Yeah.
I don't like crossbows. I've argued against them for a long time. If you're a kid or if you're disabled in any way, you have any kind of challenge that keeps you from pulling back a compound bow, all for it, have at it. But to have crossbows during archery season, that rubbed me wrong. But now I've evolved to the point where I'm like, no, wait a minute, man. Don't we want more people into sport?
Yeah.
And so here in Indiana, crossbows have been legal in archery season for a few years. I've seen that zero change. I've seen more deer in my area. But yeah, I still think we need to make it easier for people to hunt. Not just hunt, easier for them to be successful.
Yeah.
Some people are going to be like, oh, you just want to hand it to them. You just want to make it easy. So no, not necessarily. I want to make it enjoyable. There's too much competition in the world for your recreational dollar, for your time.
Yeah.
And so you've got to make them, at least challenge them, but make it that they can be successful.
I think we have to understand that hunting isn't always ingrained in everybody as a passion. I think passions can be learned. And that's kind of what I'm going through right now. I didn't grow up hunting. And I've only been hunting pheasant for the last, 7-8 years or so, and deer for the last 3. I'm slowly becoming passionate about it. But it wasn't something that I just, lived and breathed since I could walk. It wasn't part of my lifestyle. So I think the harder we make it for guys, who got in later in life, or like me, where it isn't an ingrained passion, it's a learned passion, the less we're going to want to, because it's like, well, I could be doing something else. That's
right.
Maybe easier, definitely less expensive, or it's just, there's so many different factors that go into it. And, I don't know if antler restrictions are right or wrong. I don't know.
Nor do I.
I'm just saying, I know I can take my own personal perspective on it and say, for me, if I didn't have a mentor and I wanted to get into hunting and I didn't have someone who can explain it to me, I would look at that and go, wow, this is like confusing. I don't know if I want to do this.